Egyptians had boats 4,500 years ago. Why do we think that they didn't try them out in the ocean?
Joe Rogan has once again drawn worldwide attention to something the world didn't know of. In an episode of his podcast, he mentioned that for 5,000 years, a map of America existed in Egypt, and no one had any idea of this until archaeologists scouted the ancient Egyptian pyramids and explored the Naqada culture. Now, researchers have revealed that the old map has a hidden, terrifying secret about ancient Egyptian civilization and their relationship with Americans long before Christopher Columbus. How did Egyptians know what the borders of America looked like if history claims they lacked the necessary advancements to explore their coasts? And how was the map found in the first place?
The world was mapped and explored by a global seafaring culture with a level of technology that was at least equivalent to ours at the end of the 18th century.
Keep watching, because we're about to answer these and more questions you might now have about this centuries-old map. Ancient Egypt's advanced civilization. Ancient Egypt was a very advanced civilization, especially when we consider their ability to build the massive pyramids that still stand today. These large structures, built thousands of years ago, amaze and confuse modern people. The most famous pyramids are at Giza, including the Great Pyramid, built for Pharaoh Khufu. These pyramids were constructed with such precision and skill that even with today's technology, it would be almost impossible to replicate their construction. Building a pyramid was very complicated, and you're about to see why. First off, huge blocks of limestone and granite were quarried, often from locations many miles away. These blocks, some weighing several tons, were transported to the construction site. The Egyptians used a system of ramps and sleds to move these heavy stones. It required thousands of workers, precise planning, and advanced knowledge of mathematics and engineering to ensure that each block was placed perfectly. One of the impressive features of these pyramids is their alignment with celestial objects. The Egyptians understood astronomy well and used it to align the pyramids with the stars, especially the constellation Orion, which they associated with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This level of sophistication in both their construction techniques and their astronomical knowledge shows just how advanced ancient Egypt was. Apart from their incredible architectural achievements, there's a fascinating and controversial idea that ancient Egyptians might have visited the Americas long before Christopher Columbus. This theory is based on different pieces of evidence, including ancient maps and similarities in the pyramids in Egypt and the Americas. For instance, a 5,000-year-old map in Egypt reportedly shows the places and borders in and around America. If this map is authentic, the Egyptians knew lands far beyond their own continent at the time. This idea completely contradicts the belief that Columbus was the first non-American to reach the Americas. There's also the fact that North Americans lived in America before Columbus's migration. The presence of similar architectural styles, such as pyramids in both Egypt and places like Mexico, makes this theory more convincing and likely true. For example, Steve Quayle appeared as a guest on the March 29, 2023 show and shared photos and a video of artifacts he and his team found in Mexico. One of the artifacts was an alien motif. Could this mean ancient Egyptians probably even experienced an alien visit way before modern humans came up with the existence of aliens? There's so much to think about. Some researchers have also pointed out that the Egyptians were excellent shipbuilders. They built large, sturdy ships capable of long sea voyages. One of the most famous ancient Egyptian ships is the Khufu ship, found near the Great Pyramid, and dates back to around 2500 BCE. This ship was made with such skill that it could have navigated the open seas, suggesting that the Egyptians might have been capable of long-distance maritime travel. That isn't all the shocking discoveries that have been made in Egypt. There is also the very shocking discovery of cocaine and nicotine traces in Egyptian mummies. These substances are native to the Americas, which raises the possibility of contact between ancient Egypt and the American continents. How else could these substances have ended up in Egypt if not through some form of trade or exploration? While mainstream scholars are cautious about fully accepting these ideas, the evidence is compelling and suggests that the ancient Egyptians were far more sophisticated and globally connected than previously thought. Their achievements in architecture, astronomy, and potential navigation tell of a civilization that was advanced, curious, and capable of exploring far beyond its borders. Now back to that 5,000-year-old map of America. Joe Rogan, a well-known podcast host, is very interested in the map. In one of his episodes, he talked about how the existence of the map means that ancient Egyptians knew about America long before Christopher Columbus was even born. The person who found this map was not mentioned in Joe Rogan's discussion, but the discovery itself has everyone talking. According to Joe, the map was found in an Egyptian tomb, hidden among other artifacts. The map was reportedly discovered by a team of archaeologists exploring an ancient Egyptian site. These archaeologists were digging in a tomb that dates back around 5,000 years. Among the artifacts they found, there was a series of paintings that included what looked like a map. This map was unusual because it seemed to show not just the known world of Egypt and its surroundings, but also parts of what we now recognize as the Americas. One person involved in this discovery was an archaeologist named Dr. Ibrahim Syed. Dr. Syed and his team were working in a tomb near the Nile River when they came across these mysterious paintings. The map was carefully studied, and some experts believe it shows the outlines of North and South America, various land masses, and bodies of water. What is quite scary is the accuracy of these depictions. For example, the map shows the Nile River, the Mediterranean Sea, and even mountain ranges that are recognizable today. But the most surprising part is the depiction of the Americas. The outlines of the continents are clear enough that modern scholars can identify them as North and South America. Joe Rogan's discussion drew attention to a few main points about this discovery. Apart from challenging the common belief that Christopher Columbus was the first non-American to reach the Americas, the map also includes other details that suggest the Egyptians had more than just a vague idea of America's existence. They might have had contact with people from America or received information through long-distance trade networks. The map also raises questions about the technology the Egyptians had. To create such an accurate map, they would have needed advanced tools and a deep understanding of the world around them. This includes knowledge of astronomy, as many ancient maps were based on the stars and the positions of celestial bodies. The Egyptians were known for their advanced astronomical knowledge, which they used to align their pyramids and temples. Apart from the map, there were other artifacts found in the tomb that suggest the Egyptians were very aware of the world. These included items that appeared to come from distant lands, such as exotic woods, metals, and other materials not native to Egypt. This means the Egyptians had long-distance trade and did some exploration. The map and other artifacts are the only things archaeologists found in Egypt. They also discovered an Egyptian culture called the Naqada civilization, and you'll be surprised by how advanced it was many years ago. The Nakada culture. The Nakada civilization was an ancient culture in the now southern Egypt region. It is named after Naqada, where many artifacts were found. The Nakada people lived a long time ago, way before the famous pyramids of Egypt were built. Their culture began around 4000 BCE and lasted until about 3000 BCE. The Naqada civilization laid the foundation for what would later become the great civilization of ancient Egypt. This means that many ideas, skills, and ways of life from the Naqada people were passed down and influenced the later Egyptians. The Naqada people made beautiful pottery and other artworks. They decorated their pots with pictures of animals, plants, and people. The ancient Egyptians carried on this style of art. The way the Naqada people buried their dead influenced Egyptian burial practices. They buried their dead with goods like pots, jewelry, and tools, similar to how later Egyptians buried their pharaohs with treasures. The Naqada civilization had a structured society with leaders and different social classes. This idea of a structured society with a ruler became very important in ancient Egypt, leading to the establishment of powerful pharaohs. Researchers have divided the Naqada civilization into three main periods. Each period showed advancements and changes in their culture. To start with, Naqada I, also called the Amratian period, is the earliest period, starting around 4000 BCE. During this time, the Naqada people began to settle in villages and farm the land. They grew crops like wheat and barley and raised animals such as sheep and goats. They made simple pottery and tools from stone. Naqada II, also called the Gerzean period, began around 3500 BCE. The Naqada people started to make more advanced and decorated pottery. They also began to trade with other regions, exchanging goods like beads and pottery. Their villages grew larger, and they started to build bigger houses and temples. Then Naqada III, also called the Sumerian period, is the final period, beginning around 3200 BCE. During this time, the Naqada people made even more advances. They developed writing, which later became the famous hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt. They also created better tools and weapons made of copper. The society became more complex, with influential leaders controlling large land areas. Each period had its own advancements. First off, during Naqada I, people settled in one place, grew crops, raised animals, and made simple pottery. During Naqada II, villages grew, pottery became more artistic, trade with other regions began, and houses and temples were built. Then, during Naqada III, writing was developed, tools and weapons improved, and their leaders gained more power. The Nakada people were some of the earliest farmers in ancient Egypt. They learned how to grow crops and raise animals, which allowed them to settle in one place instead of moving around to find food. This was a big step forward because they could build villages and develop a stable way of life. The Nakada people lived along the Nile River, which provided them with rich, fertile soil for farming. The Nile flooded every year, and when the waters went down, they left behind a nutrient-rich silt. This silt made the soil perfect for growing crops. They grew wheat and barley, which were their main food sources. Wheat was used to make bread, and barley was used to make porridge and beer. They also grew other plants like flax, used to make linen for clothing. The Nakada farmers used simple tools made from stone and wood. They used hoes to break up the soil and sickles to harvest the crops. To make sure their crops got enough water, the Nakada people developed basic irrigation techniques. They dug channels and ditches to direct water from the Nile to their fields. This allowed them to control the amount of water their crops received, which was very important during times when the Nile didn't flood as much. The success of Nakada agriculture can be seen in their stable food supply. By growing their own food, the Nakada people could stay in one place and build communities. This stability was essential for the development of their culture. Sometimes they grew more food than they needed. This surplus could be stored when food was scarce or traded with other communities for goods they couldn't produce themselves. They built granaries to store their surplus grain. These special buildings kept the grain dry and safe from pests, ensuring a steady food supply throughout the year. That's not half of their agricultural activities. Besides farming, the Nakada people were also skilled in raising animals. This is called animal husbandry. They kept animals like sheep, goats, and cattle. These animals provided meat, milk, and wool, which were important for their diet and clothing. They learned how to breed animals to improve their stock. They chose the best animals to reproduce, ensuring stronger and healthier offspring. Living in one place with a reliable food supply benefited the Nakada people. They could build more permanent homes, often made from mud brick. These homes were more durable and comfortable than temporary shelters. With people living together in villages, they could share resources and work together on big projects like building irrigation systems and storage granaries. A settled lifestyle allowed them to focus on other activities besides finding food. They could develop arts and crafts, trade with neighboring communities, and establish social structures with leaders and specialized roles. The Nakada people had to understand their environment well to succeed in agriculture. They observed the patterns of the Nile's flooding and learned the best times to plant and harvest their crops. This knowledge was passed down through generations, helping each new generation to improve their farming techniques. They divided the year into different agricultural seasons: planting, growing, and harvesting. This helped them organize their work and ensure each crop had the best chance to grow. They might have practiced crop rotation, growing crops in the same field in other seasons. This helped maintain the fertility of the soil and reduce the risk of diseases and pests. Caring for animals was another crucial aspect of their agricultural success. They had to ensure their animals had enough food and water, protect them from predators, and keep them healthy. They used the land around their villages to graze their animals. This involved rotating pastures to prevent overgrazing and ensure that the animals always had fresh grass to eat. They built simple shelters to protect their animals from extreme weather and provide a safe place for them to rest. As time passed, the Nakada people made some advancements that improved their agricultural practices. They developed early plows, which made it easier to prepare the soil for planting. These plows were pulled by animals like oxen, making the work faster and more efficient. They invented tools to help with irrigation, such as shadoofs. A shadoof is a simple lever device to lift water from the river to the fields. The Nakada civilization's agricultural success was a key factor in their ability to build a stable and thriving society. Their farming and animal husbandry practices allowed them to settle in one place, grow surplus food, and developed their culture. The knowledge and techniques they developed laid the groundwork for the later, more famous Egyptian civilization. That's not all. The Nakada people are also well known for their pottery, an important part of their culture. The Nakada civilization produced different types of pottery, each with its own style and purpose. Black-topped ware is one of the most famous types of Nakada pottery. The pots are red with a black top. The black color was created by placing the pots upside down in the fire during the baking process, where the smoke turned the tops black. Decorated ware pots were often decorated with drawings. The drawings showed scenes of daily life, animals, boats, and geometric patterns. These decorations give us valuable insights into how the Nakada people lived and what they valued. Then, plainware was simpler pots used for everyday purposes like cooking and storing food. They were not decorated and were more functional. Pottery was more than just a practical tool for the Nakada people. The decorated pottery shows that the Nakada people valued art and creativity. The detailed drawings on the pots tell stories and show their artistic skills. Some pottery pieces were very finely made and decorated, suggesting they belonged to important people. The quality and decoration of the pottery could indicate the social status of the owner. Pottery was often placed in graves with the deceased. This means the Nakada people believed in an afterlife and thought the dead would need these items in the next world. The Nakada civilization was not only skilled in making beautiful pottery, but also made several technological advancements that showed their ingenuity and ability to solve practical problems. The Nakada people made sharp knives from flint, a hard type of stone. These knives were used for cutting meat, plants, and other materials. Some flint knives were very finely made, with intricate designs showing their skill in working with stone. They also crafted arrowheads and spearheads from flint and other stones. These were used for hunting and defense, demonstrating their understanding of tool-making and survival techniques. The Nakada people's artistic skills are pretty obvious in their pottery and other artifacts. The detailed drawings on their pottery often depicted scenes of daily life, animals, boats, and patterns. These decorations were not only beautiful, but also told stories and conveyed information about their society. They made small figurines from clay and stone, representing humans and animals. They also created jewelry from beads and stones, worn as adornments, and possibly had symbolic meanings. Toward the later periods of the Nakada civilization, they started using copper to make tools and weapons. Copper tools were stronger and more durable than stone tools. This shift to metalworking was an impressive technological advancement. The Nakada people built their houses from mud bricks. These bricks were made by mixing mud with straw and drying them in the sun. Mud brick houses were sturdy and provided good insulation against the hot climate. They also constructed larger buildings, such as temples and communal structures, showing their ability to plan and execute more advanced construction projects, including irrigation systems. Speaking of irrigation, the Nakada people developed basic irrigation systems to water their crops. They dug canals and ditches to direct water from the Nile to their fields. This allowed them to control the water supply and ensure their crops got enough moisture. They also used a simple shadoof device to lift water from a river or canal. It consists of a long pole balanced on a pivot with a bucket on one end and a counterweight on the other. The shadoof made it easier to move water to higher ground. Archaeologists then explored the darker parts of Nakada, especially the places that connect the living with the dead, graves, and what they found had them on their toes to learn more about the culture. Graves in Nakada. Sir William Matthew Flinders Petrie was a famous archaeologist who played a major part in discovering the Nakada civilization. He conducted many excavations in Egypt, including important sites related to Nakada. Petrie used careful and systematic methods in his excavations. He documented everything he found in great detail, which was uncommon then. Petrie discovered many artifacts and graves that provided valuable information about the Nakada people. Petrie found several types of graves which helped him understand the social structure of Nakada. The first kind of graves he found were simple graves. These were small pits with few items, showing that not everyone had the same status. He also found rich graves which were much larger than simple ones and contained many valuable items. These graves had pottery, jewelry, tools, and sometimes even small figurines. The presence of such graves indicates a class of wealthy and powerful people. Petrie found many artifacts that tell us about the daily life and culture of the Nakada people. He saw many types of pottery, including the famous black-topped ware and decorated pots. The decorations on the pottery provide insights into the art and beliefs of the Nakada people. Petrie discovered tools made from stone and copper, showing the technological advancements of the Nakada civilization. He found jewelry made from beads and stones, as well as small figurines representing humans and animals. These artifacts suggest that the Nakada people valued personal adornment and had artistic skills. The Nakada civilization greatly influenced the formation of the early Egyptian state. Their advancements in agriculture, social structure, and governance basically laid the foundation for what would later become the great civilization of ancient Egypt. The Nakada people were among the first to settle along the Nile River and develop advanced farming techniques. They learned how to grow crops like wheat and barley using their irrigation systems, which allowed them to produce surplus food. This surplus led to the growth of villages and communities, creating a stable foundation for a more organized society. Nakada society was structured with different social classes and emerging leaders. This centralized leadership provided stability and allowed for more efficient decision-making. Over time, these leaders gained control over larger territories, laying the groundwork for the centralized government of ancient Egypt. The Nakada civilization also had a cultural influence on early Egypt. Their pottery, artwork, and burial practices were adopted and adapted by later Egyptian civilizations. The rich symbolism and artistic styles of Nakada pottery can be seen in the pottery of ancient Egypt, as well as in other aspects of their culture. Archaeological evidence supports the existence of social patterns and centralized leadership in Nakada. The presence of different types of graves with varying levels of wealth and goods hints at social stratification. The layout of Nakada villages indicates organization and planning, with public buildings and areas for different activities. Although writing had not yet developed, symbols and early forms of communication have been found, suggesting the existence of leadership and social organization. Trade and craftsmanship were essential aspects of Nakada society, contributing to their economic prosperity and cultural exchange with neighboring regions. The Nakada people established trade networks with neighboring areas, exchanging goods and ideas. Archaeological finds have uncovered items such as pottery, metals, and precious stones from distant areas, indicating trade connections. Some artifacts found in Nakada sites, such as ivory and obsidian, were unavailable locally, suggesting they were acquired through trade. Nakada artisans were skilled in various crafts besides pottery. They loved metalworking and textile production. The craftsmanship and artistic quality of Nakada pottery rivaled that of other ancient civilizations. The Nakada people were among the first to work with metals like copper, producing tools, weapons, and decorative items. Their metalworking skills were advanced for their time and contributed to their economic prosperity. In fact, Nakada's craftsmanship is so mind-blowing that it can be compared with that of other top ancient civilizations. Nakada pottery shares similarities with pottery found in Mesopotamia, such as decorative motifs and techniques. Both civilizations also developed metalworking skills. The craftsmanship of the Nakada people shares similarities with the Indus Valley civilization, particularly in pottery and metalworking. This suggests cultural exchange and trade between the two regions. Ancient Egyptians, being such skilled shipbuilders, wasn't their only accomplishment in shipbuilding. Their ships were typically made from locally sourced wood and papyrus reeds. Some of the earliest Egyptian boats were made from bundles of papyrus reeds tied together. These boats were lightweight and flexible, suitable for navigating the Nile's shallow waters. As Egyptian shipbuilding techniques advanced, they began constructing wooden ships using planks of wood fastened together with pegs and rope. These ships were larger and sturdier, capable of longer journeys on the open sea. Egyptian sailors used various tools to navigate, including the sun, stars, and landmarks along the coast. They also likely used simple instruments like the astrolabe and the kamal to measure angles and determine their position. Egyptians established trade routes along the Nile and across the Mediterranean Sea, trading goods like grain, gold, and precious stones with neighboring regions like Mesopotamia and the Levant. One of the most famous Egyptian voyages was Queen Hatshepsut's expedition to the land of Punt around 1493 BCE. Punt was a mysterious land known for its exotic goods, including myrrh, ebony, and incense. The expedition was undertaken to establish trade relations with Punt and acquire its valuable commodities. Hatshepsut sent many ships down the Red Sea, led by her trusted officials. The journey took several months, with the ships navigating treacherous waters and enduring harsh conditions. The expedition was a great success, returning with a wealth of goods from Punt, including trees, plants, and animals. This voyage helped to establish Egypt as a major player in the ancient world of trade. Although Egyptian and Mesoamerican pyramids were built in different regions and for other purposes, they share some architectural similarities. First off, both types of pyramids have a similar stepped or terraced structure, with sloping sides leading to a flat top. Secondly, both Egyptian and Mesoamerican pyramids were used for religious and ceremonial purposes, serving as monumental structures dedicated to gods or rulers. Both civilizations also used similar construction techniques, including stone blocks or adobe bricks, ramps for construction, and labor-intensive methods. Did you know Egyptian pyramids mainly were built as tombs for pharaohs and their families? They were eternal resting places for the deceased rulers and their belongings. Egyptian pyramids were constructed using large stone blocks, quarried and transported to the construction site. They were built on a square or rectangular base, with 4 sloping sides meeting at a point at the top. Mesoamerican pyramids were multifunctional structures for religious ceremonies, rituals, and astronomical observations. They were also sometimes used as platforms for temples or palaces. Mesoamerican pyramids were often constructed using adobe bricks or stone blocks, with staircases leading to the top. They were typically built in a stepped or terraced design, with each level representing a different stage of construction or significance. While there is no direct evidence of contact between ancient Egypt and Mesoamerica, some scholars suggest the possibility of cultural exchanges through indirect trade routes or maritime exploration. Both regions were connected to extensive trade networks that facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. It is possible that indirect trade routes could have facilitated the transfer of architectural knowledge between the two regions. Egyptian sailors were known to have explored the Mediterranean and possibly beyond. It is conceivable that they could have reached the shores of the Americas, although evidence for such voyages is scarce. Then there were also hieroglyphs found in Egypt. They were a form of writing used by the ancient Egyptians to record their language, beliefs, and history. Similarly, Mesoamerican cultures such as the Maya and Aztecs also developed their own systems of writing, which included hieroglyphs. Egyptian hieroglyphs were used in various contexts, including monumental inscriptions, religious texts, and administrative documents. Hieroglyphs were written on various surfaces, including stone, papyrus, and pottery. They were often carved or painted onto surfaces using brushes or chisels. Do you agree with Joe Rogan that Columbus really wasn't the first non-American to step foot in America? We would love to know in the comments. If you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to leave a like, share it with your family and friends, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next updates.